She fled for her life, belly full and nowhere left to turn. He found her half dead in the snow and made her a promise she didn't understand. She thought he saved her, but he claimed her instead. The wind howled through the pines like a living thing, dragging sharp flurries across the mountain path as if it meant to erase all trace of the woman struggling up its slope. Her name was Clara Ridge, and she was nearly 8 months with child, belly heavy under a threadbare shawl, boots splitting at the seams, hands blue with cold. She stopped feeling her fingers sometime past the last ridge, but she hadn't dared pause. If she stopped, she'd die, and the child inside her would die with her. There had been no sound behind her for hours, but Clara still cast glances over her shoulder, as if she expected the devil himself to come cresting the rise behind her. And perhaps he would. She hadn't waited to see if Aaron Wexler was truly dead. She'd run while his brothers shouted and cursed, run while his blood still steamed on the floorboards of that God-forsaken cabin, run until her legs gave out and her vision blurred and her lungs felt like torn paper. Now her legs shook with every step. Her breath came in ragged, desperate gasps. The snow was waist-deep in places, and her coat, if it could be called that, was soaked through. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, long and low and far too close. She pressed a hand over her belly and whispered, "Not yet, little one. Hold on for me." Then her foot caught something under the snow, and Clara tumbled forward with a cry, face first into the drifts. For a moment she lay still, too exhausted to rise, snow packing into her collar, into her sleeves, stealing the last warmth from her skin. She turned her face toward the dim sky, eyelids fluttering closed. And that's when she heard the boots. Slow, heavy, crunching snow with deliberate steps, not rushed, not surprised. Whoever it was had seen her already and wasn't afraid. Clara blinked snowflakes from her lashes and tried to push herself upright. Her arms trembled. She couldn't see more than a shadow through the swirl of snow. Then the figure stepped closer, towering, broad as a cabin doorway, wrapped in furs and leather. A wild beard covered half his face, and a thick scar ran from his cheekbone to the hinge of his jaw. His eyes, dark and steady, looked down on her without blinking. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached out a gloved hand. Clara flinched, but her strength was gone. She couldn't move. "You ain't gonna make it 5 minutes like that," he said, voice low and rough, like gravel soaked in whiskey. She didn't answer, couldn't. Her mouth was too dry to speak. "You comin' with me?" he said. He didn't ask, he didn't wait. He just scooped her into his arms like she weighed nothing and turned back into the trees, boots trudging through snow like it was a path he'd walked 100 times. Clara tried to speak, tried to ask who he was, what he wanted, where he was taking her, but all that came from her lips was a cracked, broken whisper. Still, she felt his chest rumble as he spoke again. "You're mine until I have my children," he muttered. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to scream, but the darkness took her first. She woke to firelight. Crackling, warm, flickering light dancing across wooden walls and rough-hewn beams, the smell of pine smoke, the feel of coarse blankets under her hands, and something else, meat cooking, real meat. Her eyes flew open. She sat up too fast and cried out, one hand going to her belly. The baby shifted inside her, still alive, still waiting. The room was dim, a small cabin, sparse but clean. She was on a cot near the hearth, her boots removed, her shawl hanging by the fire to dry. There were tools on the wall, traps and axes, skins and ropes. A rifle leaned in the corner, long and old but well cared for. And at the table, back to her, sat the mountain man. He turned slightly, as if he'd known she was awake the whole time. "You're up," he said. Clara swallowed. "Who are you?" she rasped. He didn't answer. My name is Clara," she tried again. "Clara Ridge." He stood, walked toward her, set a steaming cup of something on the small table beside her bed. "Drink that." She stared at him. "You said I heard you say something about children." "I said you're mine," he cut in flatly. Until I have my children, that ain't changed. Clara recoiled. I don't understand. You will, he said, turning back toward the hearth. Her fingers trembled as they wrapped around the mug. The tea, or broth she couldn't tell, was scalding hot and sharp with herbs. It burned all the way down, but she didn't stop sipping. Not until he spoke again. You runnin' from someone? He asked, not turning around. She hesitated. Yes. Dead or alive? I don't know. I think I killed him. The man grunted. Good. She stared at him. What? Only dead men deserve women who run like that. Clara didn't know what to say. So she said nothing. The man turned at last, kneeling near the hearth, feeding it more wood. My name's Barrett Cade, he said. Clara whispered it, Barrett. He didn't look at her. Why did you help me? Barrett stood slowly, wiping his hands on his coat. Didn't do it to be kind, he said. You're carrying, that matters. Clara stared. Matters why? Barrett stepped closer. The fire behind him threw his face into shadows. I lost mine, he said, voice tight, and I ain't about to lose another, you understand. Her heart pounded. He reached out and placed a hand over her belly. Not harsh, not possessive, just firm and quiet. That child's mine now, so you are too. Clara slapped his hand away. You can't say that, you don't even know me. Barrett didn't flinch. You want to leave? He asked. She blinked. No. He nodded once. Then eat, rest, I'll see to the traps. And just like that, he walked out the door, leaving Clara shaking beneath the blankets, unsure if she'd just been saved or claimed. The door creaked on its hinges as Barrett stepped out, and the wind returned with a hungry howl. Clara stared at the space he'd left behind, the heat of his palm still lingering on her belly. Her hands instinctively wrapped around the swell of her stomach, protective and unsure, her mind racing through every word he'd said. Mine until I have my children. What did that even mean? Was he mad? Was he planning to take her baby? Was this just another prison, dressed in warmth and food and firelight? She stood up too fast again. The blood drained from her head, making her vision tilt dangerously. But she steadied herself. She wasn't going to lie in bed and wait for answers that never came. She needed to see the layout of this place, learn its exits, its weaknesses, anything that might tell her what kind of man had brought her here. The cabin wasn't large. A main room with a stone hearth, a roughly carved table and a sleeping cot, his, she assumed, against the far wall. There was a curtain drawn across the back of the room, hiding what might have been a storage area or a root cellar, but she didn't feel strong enough yet to explore. Her knees still trembled from hours in the snow. There was no lock on the door, no obvious signs of traps. The rifle rested against the far wall, out of reach but not hidden. Still, something about the space made her pause. It didn't feel like the lair of a madman. Everything had a place. The tools were clean, the hearth well kept, the water basin full. A loaf of bread, fresh, maybe from the day before, sat covered on a plate near the window. The windows themselves were small but clear, not boarded or barred, and a faded Bible lay open on the table, a pressed flower marking a page as if someone had left off mid-thought. She touched the flower gently, wild lupin, wilted now. She turned her attention back to the mug he'd left her, still warm, and forced herself to drink again. Whatever it was, it made her limbs tingle, and the tightness in her back eased slightly. Barrett returned before the cup was empty. His boots crunched just once outside before the door swung open, snow curling in at his feet. He carried 2 rabbits slung over one shoulder, and a satchel stuffed with herbs, roots, and something wrapped in cloth. Clara froze. He saw the tension in her and didn't react. Just stomped the snow off his boots and moved to the hearth, laying the rabbits down on the table. You looked through my things, he asked flatly, voice low but not angry. No, she said quickly. I just stood up, needed to move. Barrett grunted, "You shouldn't yet." "I don't need your permission," Clara replied, and immediately regretted the sharpness in her voice. But Barrett didn't rise to it. He only nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. "You got fire in you," he said. "That's good." "I have fear in me," she corrected. "Don't confuse the two." Barrett peeled off his coat, revealing a heavy shirt beneath, stained from labor and age. His arms were thick with muscle, scarred and sun-darkened, and his hands moved with the precision of a man who'd done the same thing every day for years. He began skinning the rabbits with a hunting knife so sharp it parted the fur like water. The sound made Clara queasy, but she didn't look away. "You want to ask questions," he said quietly, not glancing up. "Go ahead." Clara swallowed. "You said you lost yours. What did you mean?" Barrett paused, fingers stilling on the rabbit's flank. "My wife, my son." A long silence followed. "How?" "Fire," he said. "Winter caught us lean. Tried to keep the fire going too long without cleaning the chimney. Woke up to the walls screaming." Clara felt her stomach twist. "I was out trapping, came back to ashes. That was 5 years ago." She didn't ask more. Didn't need to. His voice had gone hollow near the end, like a well run dry. Barrett wiped the blade and began slicing herbs onto a board. "Since then, I stayed out here. Don't go into town, don't bring people in. You're the first." "Then why me?" "I told you, you were out there carrying. That child doesn't deserve the death that waited in those woods." "But you said—" "I know what I said," he cut in. "I ain't talking the child, I ain't that man." Clara studied him carefully. His face was hard, unreadable, but his hands, they moved gently now, preparing the meal with strange reverence. "I didn't come here to be owned," she said. "You ain't," he replied, "but you're mine to protect, that's all." The words landed heavy in the silence. Then Barrett nodded toward the corner. "I got a better coat. Yours is falling apart. It's dry now. Change into it after you eat." Clara didn't move. He looked up, eyes steady. "I won't watch." And he didn't. As she quietly picked at the rabbit stew he made, he went outside again, splitting wood, checking the snare lines, working like a man who didn't know how to be still. By nightfall, the snow had stopped. The sky had gone clear, and the moon hung sharp and full above the trees. Clara sat near the fire with a thicker coat around her shoulders, watching the flames, trying to make sense of this strange man and the storm she'd escaped. Barrett returned with his arms full of logs and stacked them silently by the hearth. He seemed to move quieter now, softer even. There was something different in the way he looked at her, though she couldn't name it. "You still scared of me?" he asked quietly, voice barely louder than the fire's crackle. Clara nodded. "I'd be a fool not to be." Barrett sat on the floor across from her, legs stretched out, arms draped loosely over his knees. "Then why didn't you run when I left you alone earlier?" Clara met his gaze. "Because I'm tired of running." Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile, not quite sorrow either. "Then rest," he said. "Ain't no one common here unless I let 'em." "You said you don't go into town," Clara said. "Then how do you get supplies?" "I trap, I trade. Once a season I go down the West Trail to old Miller's outpost. He leaves goods in exchange." Clara frowned. "And you trust him?" "I don't trust anyone," Barrett said, "but he owes me a debt." He leaned back, looking toward the ceiling. "That baby'll come soon." Clara felt her breath catch. "Yes." "You got anyone, family?" "No one left," she whispered. "Just me and her." Barrett blinked. "Her?" "I don't know for sure, but I feel it, a girl." Barrett nodded slowly. "Then I'll make sure she makes it here, into the world." "Why?" Clara asked, her voice small. Barrett didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Because I couldn't save mine, but maybe I was meant to save someone else's." And there it was again, that flicker of something buried under all his silence, redemption or guilt, maybe both. Clara leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed, the fire warming her legs. "I don't know if I believe you yet," she said. Barrett chuckled once, dry and low. "Good." They didn't speak after that. The silence between them was no longer sharp. It had softened, stretched into something like acceptance. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of metal clanking. She sat up quickly, instinct sharp, one hand braced on her belly. Barrett was crouched near the window, rifle in hand, staring out toward the trees. "What is it?" Clara whispered. He didn't look at her. "Riders." "How many?" "2, maybe 3, coming slow like they're looking." Clara's blood ran cold. Barrett stood and moved to the door, silent as a ghost. He opened a floorboard and retrieved a second rifle, then crossed to her and set it down. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. Clara stared at it, then nodded. "Good." Barrett moved back to the door, eyes locked on the trail. Clara's heart pounded. She had a sinking feeling. The past hadn't stayed dead. The morning light had barely touched the edge of the cabin when Barrett stepped out onto the porch, rifle cradled against his forearm, eyes narrowed toward the tree line. The riders were still a ways off, 2 of them now, not 3, just like he'd guessed. They weren't in a hurry, but they weren't meandering either. Every few paces, the lead one would stop and look around, like a dog sniffing for a scent that refused to stay hidden. Clara stood just inside the door, the cold bleeding in around her ankles. She didn't need to see the men to know who they might be. She could feel it in her chest, the tight, constricting panic that came with knowing her past had caught up. Her breath stuttered as she braced one hand against the wall and the other over her belly. Barrett didn't speak for a long moment. His gaze was steady, fixed on the way the snow broke beneath the horse's hooves. "They're not just passing," he said at last. "I know," Clara whispered. Barrett turned to her, eyes darker than she'd seen them yet. "You recognize M?" "I can't see their faces," she replied, "but I'd bet my life the one up front is Caleb Wexler, Aaron's older brother." Barrett's jaw tensed. "You think they tracked you all the way out here?" Clara nodded. "Caleb would have sent word to the others, tried to sniff out where I'd run, and if someone saw me pass near Devil's Fork or along the canyon trail, then they know you're near." Barrett muttered something low under his breath. Not a curse, not blasphemy, just the sound of a man who didn't appreciate being hunted on his own land. He stepped back inside, closed the door softly, and crossed to the small window, where he pulled a heavy fur down over the pane. "You'll go down into the root cellar," he said quietly. "There's a false panel in the back, crawl space beyond it. They won't find it if you don't move or make a sound." Clara shook her head. "I'm not hiding while you face them alone." "You're pregnant." "I'm not helpless." Barrett stepped closer, not angrily, not to intimidate, just close enough that when he spoke she had to hear him. "I didn't save you from that snow just to lose you to a bullet," he said. "And I sure didn't say you were mine just to watch you get dragged back to whatever hell you came from." Clara stared up at him, throat tight. "I'm not your property," she whispered. "You're right," he said, "but you are under my roof, and my rules say the living don't get handed over to the dead." Clara frowned. "What does that mean?" Barrett didn't answer. He stepped away again and retrieved his coat, his long knife, and a second rifle. He loaded it with quick, practiced movements, then leaned it near the door before returning to the stove. There, he ladled something into a bowl, a stew she'd helped prepare the day before, and placed it on the table like it was just another morning. The knock came 15 minutes later. It was slow, measured, 2 taps and a pause. Barrett didn't flinch. He set the ladle down, wiped his hands on his shirt, and opened the door. "Morning," said the man on the porch. Caleb Wexler was as Clara remembered, sharp features, a crooked smile that never reached his eyes, and a voice like velvet soaked in vinegar. His coat was expensive, black wool with brass buttons, too fine for the trail, and his gloves were dyed leather. The man beside him was younger, quiet, more brutish, with a scar down one cheek and a shotgun across his back. "You lost?" Barrett asked, voice flat. "No, sir, not exactly. Name S. Caleb Wexler, my brother's gone missing. Wife too. Well, not really a wife. They hadn't had the ceremony yet, but near enough, you understand." Barrett said nothing. Caleb's smile twitched. Saw tracks heading up this way, fresh, thought maybe someone took her in. Barrett crossed his arms. "Ain't seen no woman but the trees, and they don't talk." Caleb chuckled. "Well, that's true enough, but I figure maybe if you're alone out here you wouldn't mind a little company, or a trade. We got sugar, coffee, even some coin if you're short." Barrett's expression didn't shift. "Don't need sugar, don't want company, don't take coin." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "You sure about that?" Barrett stepped forward, just enough that his bulk filled the doorframe. "You threatening me, boy?" Caleb's smile returned, but tighter now. "No, sir, just asking questions. Figured maybe a decent man wouldn't lie to folks in need." "You don't look in need to me," Barrett replied. "You look like trouble in good boots." Behind the two men, their horses shifted nervously. Snow flurried sideways in the rising wind. Caleb looked past Barrett, toward the faint wisp of smoke curling from the chimney. "If she's here," he said softly, "you're harboring a killer." Barrett's eyes flashed. "And if she AI?" Caleb didn't answer. Barrett stepped back a pace, just enough to reach behind the door, and when he came forward again, the second rifle was in his hands. "Then you best ride on before I decide your boots look better on my floor." The silence that followed was brittle. Caleb stared at him for several long seconds, then nodded once and turned to go. His companion hesitated, his eyes scanning the windows, the door, the tracks in the snow. Then he followed. Barrett didn't move until both horses disappeared around the bend. Only then did he lower the rifle, shut the door, and slide the latch into place. Clara emerged from the cellar 10 minutes later, knees dusty, breath shallow. "He's not going to stop," she said, "even if you scared him off." "I know. He'll go get more, or come back in the night." "I know that too." Barrett leaned against the table, arms folded, staring at nothing. "You didn't tell them I was here," Clara said after a moment. Barrett looked at her like that was the most absurd thing she could have said. "Of course I didn't." "Why not?" she pressed. "You don't owe me anything." Barrett pushed off the table and walked to the hearth, feeding the fire. "You're right, I don't." Clara waited. He didn't elaborate. So she crossed the room and stood near him, eyes on the flames. "My child's not his," she said suddenly. "Not Aaron S." Barrett looked over, eyebrows raised slightly. Clara's voice shook. "It was his brother's, Matthew, the oldest Wexler. He wasn't kind. None of them were, but him least of all." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Aaron took me because Matthew didn't want the trouble, said I was soiled, said a mountain dog'd be better than a woman carrying his bastard. Aaron liked the idea of keeping me as a reminder. Caleb just wants to clean up the mess." Barrett stared at the fire a long time. Then he said, "And you still want to leave when the snow melts?" Clara looked up at him. "I don't know what I want," she said. "I only know I don't want to be caught again." Barrett nodded once. "Then we'll make sure you're not." She asked quietly. He turned to her. "I said you're mine until I have my children." Clara's voice wavered. "You mean to protect?" Barrett's eyes didn't move from hers. "I mean I'll keep you breathing long enough to raise her yourself. I mean you'll have a warm place and no chains. I mean I'll feed you. I'll guard you. And if any man comes knocking again, I'll bury him myself." Tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. "I don't need saving," she whispered. "Didn't say you did. I need someone to stand with me, not over me." Barrett stepped forward just once, then nodded. "Then stand we will." She looked at him, unsure if the pain in her chest was fear leaving or hope taking its place. Outside, the wind screamed again, but inside, the fire burned steady, and for the first time since she'd fled, Clara let herself sit without checking the door every minute. But far beyond the trail, Caleb Wexler wasn't done. And the next time he came, he wouldn't knock. 2 days passed without sign of Caleb Wexler. The snow melted slightly beneath a timid sun, then froze hard again overnight, crusting the land in sharp white glass. Barrett kept close to the cabin those days, rifle slung over his shoulder at all times, eyes always sweeping the trail even when his hands were occupied with wood or snares. Clara saw the tension in his jaw, the way he moved slower but never relaxed. He wasn't fooled by silence. Neither was she. Inside, the fire never went out. The baby kicked more often, sometimes sharply enough to steal Clara's breath, as if she already knew the world outside waited with claws and teeth. Clara would press her palm to her belly and whisper soothing things, names, prayers, nonsense, and sometimes she would feel Barrett's gaze settle on her from across the room. He never asked to touch her again. But once, after she winced from a sudden kick, he rose, took her cup, refilled it without a word, and set it back in her hands. That night Clara woke screaming. She sat bolt upright in the cot, clutching her belly, sweat pouring down her face. In the dream, fire had wrapped around the cabin, thick black smoke curling through the cracks. Caleb had stood in the doorway, eyes lit with something terrible, dragging Barrett's body by the arm, blood marking the snow. Barrett was beside her in an instant. "Clara!" His voice cut through the panic like a knife. She gasped for air, her hands shook, the baby rolled inside her as if frightened too. Barrett crouched beside the cot, a hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. "It's a dream," he said. "You're safe." She shook her head. "He's going to come back." "I know. He's going to burn it down. He's going to kill you." "Not before I kill him." Clara looked into Barrett's face and saw the certainty there. Not bravado, not even rage, just the cold steadiness of a man who'd already decided what line he'd die defending. She reached for him before she knew what she was doing. Her hand found his shirt front, twisted there, held tight. Barrett didn't move. "I don't want to see you die for me," she whispered. "You won't," he replied. "I don't want to bury you." "You won't." The silence between them stretched long and slow. And then she said it, so softly it barely made it across the air. "I don't want to be alone again." Barrett's hand finally came to rest over hers, rough fingers curling around her cold knuckles. "You're not," he said. Clara closed her eyes and let her head fall forward, forehead resting against his. Neither moved for a long time. The next day, Barrett rose early and pulled on his oldest coat, the one with the patched sleeves and broken buttons. Clara watched him from the table, hands wrapped around her tea. "You're going somewhere," she said. He nodded. "Miller's Outpost." "That's nearly 6 hours out." "5 if I move steady. I'll be back before dark." Clara frowned. "You're leaving me here alone." "You'll have the rifle," he said, "and traps on the trail, and the hatch secured from inside." She hesitated. Why risk going now? "Because when Wexler comes back, I want more than one rifle. I want powder, nails, oil. Anything I can trade for that'll burn faster than pine." "You're preparing for war." "I'm preparing to keep you breathing." She didn't like it, but she nodded. Barrett slung his satchel over his shoulder, handed her a bundle of jerky and a loaded pistol, then paused in the doorway. "If I'm not back by nightfall," he said, "lock the hatch and stay down." Clara stood slowly. You'll come back, she said, not asking. Barrett looked at her, and for the first time there was something close to a smile in his eyes. I always do. Then he stepped into the snow, boots crunching steadily down the path. Barrett didn't return by nightfall. The sun slid behind the western ridge and the cabin grew dark, shadows swallowing the corners. Clara paced near the window, heart hammering. She lit the lantern, then doused it again. If he was coming back, he'd know the trail. But if Caleb was out there too? She locked the hatch, placed the pistol near the cot, and moved the rifle closer to the hearth. Every sound made her twitch. An owl hooted once. A branch snapped. And then a knock. Not heavy, not light, just deliberate. Clara's breath stopped. Her hand found the rifle. Another knock. Barrett, she called, voice sharp. No answer. A third knock. Then silence. She moved to the door slowly, rifle braced against her shoulder. Say something, she whispered. If it's you, say something. Nothing. And then very faintly, it's me. Clara exhaled so hard her knees went weak. She pulled the door open and froze. It was Barrett. But he was bleeding. His coat was shredded at the sleeve, a deep gash along his bicep leaking blood down to his glove. His face was scraped, snow crusted in his beard. He stumbled through the doorway before she could catch him. Clara, get the traps, he gasped. He's coming. She dragged him to the cot, hands already pressing against the wound. What happened? Ambushed near the outpost. Caleb had a man there. Miller warned me just in time. Clara grabbed the bandages and herbs she'd seen him use before, fingers fumbling. You fought him. I lost him, but he's trailing. When? Tonight. Clara's eyes darted to the window. How many? At least 3, maybe 4. Barrett grabbed her wrist suddenly. Clara, he said, if they take me down. Stop. Listen to me. If I fall, you run. I won't leave you. You will. You'll take the satchel by the stove. It's got maps, money. The canyon trail's narrow. They can't follow fast. Barrett. I won't die here, he said, but I might not walk away clean. Clara pressed her hand to his jaw. You don't get to say goodbye, she said. Not after what you've done for me. Barrett met her eyes, and something passed between them again. Not fear, not even sorrow. Just a terrible, resolute understanding. They were bound now. Not by blood or name, but by the kind of promise people only make at the edge of the world. That night Clara barely slept. She laid traps near the trail, checked the rifles, cleaned the knives. Barrett dozed in the cot, sweat beading on his brow. His wound was deep but not deadly. Not yet. She changed the bandage twice, each time whispering something over him, words that weren't quite prayers but close. Just after midnight, the horses came. She heard them first. Low, quiet hoofbeats, snow crunching, muffled voices. Clara moved to the window and parted the fur just enough. 3 figures. One carried a torch. They dismounted near the edge of the trees and crouched. Then they spread out. She raced to Barrett. They're here. He sat up slowly, gritting his teeth. Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded. Help me up. No. Clara. You can't stand yet. I'll buy us time. He grabbed her wrist hard. You step out there, they'll shoot. So will I, she said, and I won't miss. Barrett stared at her. Then nodded. Stay low, he said. She crept to the window again. The man with the torch was closest now, nearing the front steps. She cocked the rifle. He reached the porch. And she fired. The blast cracked through the night, echoing off the mountain. The man screamed, dropped the torch, and tumbled backward into the snow. Voices shouted in alarm. Clara ran to the back window. Another man circled, creeping low. She fired again. This time silence. Then gunfire. The cabin window shattered. Wood splintered near her head. She ducked. Barrett was up now, rifle in hand, bracing against the doorframe. Where? Backside. He nodded, aimed through the narrow crack and fired. A scream. Another shot fired wide. Then nothing. Just the sound of horses panicking, running. And a voice in the dark. You can't hold out forever, girl. Caleb. Clara stepped into the doorway, rifle raised. I only need one shot. You think that mountain man's gonna save you again? He already did. Caleb laughed. You think you've won? I've got more men coming. By morning you'll be ash and bone. And then he disappeared into the dark. The forest swallowed him. But his words stayed. Clara turned to Barrett. They'll come back. I know. Then we don't wait. Barrett raised an eyebrow. We take the fight to them, Clara said. He stared at her a moment, then smiled. And this time it reached his eyes. The dawn didn't break so much as bleed across the sky, thin, pale light smeared across low gray clouds. The cold was sharp again, dry and biting, whispering through the pines like a warning no one listened to. Inside the cabin, Clara sat sharpening a blade with slow, focused strokes while Barrett stitched the edge of his sleeve closed with one hand, the other braced against the table. His wound still ached, but he was upright now, jaw set, eyes cold with calculation. There was no more pretending they were safe. That illusion had burned the second Caleb Wexler, showed up with rifles and rope and men, who aimed without hesitation. Barrett paused his stitching. You're sure you want to do this? Clara didn't look up. If we wait for him to strike again, he'll bring more firepower, and I won't have my daughter born into a siege. He nodded, approving. We catch them first, out where the snow slows their horses, where they ain't expecting it. And if they've brought more men already? Clara asked. Barrett tucked the needle through the last loop and tied it off. Then we make the ground work for us. They spent the morning laying traps, real ones now, not just rabbit snares. Barrett showed her where the terrain would funnel riders, where ice crusted too thin over shallow ravines, where felled logs could become sudden walls. They de-learned the land separately, but now they worked it as one mind. Clara's boots slipped more often than his, and she moved slower thanks to the weight of the child inside her, but she didn't complain. Barrett never asked if she needed rest. He just paused when she did, and they went on without a word. By afternoon, they'd rigged a stretch of the Eastern Trail with enough surprises to make even seasoned men rethink their approach. Barrett stashed powder charges near 2 fallen trees, nothing fancy, just enough to scare horses and force the riders off them. Clara suggested placing mirrors from an old lantern among the branches, angled to reflect light and confuse aim. He raised a brow at the idea, then quietly followed her lead. When they returned to the cabin, the silence felt different, heavier, like the walls knew what was coming. Clara moved to the hearth, stirred the stew she'd left on the low coals and ladled it into 2 bowls. Barrett sat at the table, took his without a word. They ate like soldiers before battle, quickly, efficiently, as if they didn't dare leave the bowls half full. Afterward, Clara stood near the window, arms folded beneath her belly. He'll come at night again, she said. Barrett rose, stretched his shoulders slowly. He'll come thinking we're weaker, thinking we'll run. Clara looked at him, but we're not running. He met her gaze. No. That night they didn't sleep. Barrett loaded every weapon. Clara braided her hair back tight, kept a knife in her boot and another in her sleeve. They took shifts watching the windows, ears tuned to the wind, to the silence between the pines. And then, close to midnight, it came. Distant hooves, faint but deliberate, more than 2. Clara counted at least 5. Barrett's expression didn't change. He nodded toward the hatch. Get down. Last time I let you take the first shot. This time it's me. Clara didn't move. I'm not hiding. You're not fighting either, he growled. I am, she said quietly, and you're going to let me. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally nodded once. They doused the hearth until the flames were just embers, moved through the shadows like ghosts, took their positions behind the logs, the crates, the broken rocking chair Barrett had dragged near the west wall for cover. The riders came slowly, torches held high, their coats heavy with frost. Caleb Wexler led them again, always Caleb, always grinning like he'd already won. But his smile faded as he neared the bend and saw the trail ahead dark and too still. Barrett waited until they crossed the first marker. Then he fired. The powder charge ignited with a deafening crack. Horses screamed, rearing and twisting as flames shot skyward. One man tumbled off his mount and rolled, his coat catching sparks. Another was thrown, landing hard in the snow. Caleb roared something, but Clara couldn't hear it. Her pulse throbbed too loud in her ears. She moved to the back window, took aim, and fired at a rider circling toward the cabin's flank. He went down hard. Barrett fired again, hitting one of the logs they'd stacked earlier. It rolled down into the path, slamming into a horse's legs. The beast toppled, and its rider vanished in a tangle of limbs and snow. Then silence. Thick and sudden. Clara ducked back, heart racing. Her hands trembled as she reloaded. Barrett stepped up beside her. We got 3 down. How many left? At least 2, maybe more if they held back. Caleb. Still out there. He's smart enough not to lead the charge this time. A voice rose from the trees. You think you can kill us all, mountain man? Barrett didn't answer. Clara raised her rifle again. I got no quarrel with you, girl, Caleb shouted. You come out now, I'll let you live. Clara stepped into the doorway, the rifle cradled in her arms. I've already lived more in these mountains than I ever did in your house, Caleb. He laughed loud and false. You think he loves you? No, she said, but he respects me, and that's more than you ever managed. A shot rang out, striking the doorframe inches from her head. Barrett yanked her back inside, shoved the door shut and barred it. He's not trying to bargain anymore, Clara said, panting. No, Barrett agreed. Now he's just hunting. They held position for another hour waiting. The moon rose higher. No more shots came. No more riders charged, but the woods remained unsettled. Caleb was still out there, planning, watching. We'll need to move, Barrett said. When? Tomorrow, just before dawn. Clara blinked. Where? There's a place 3 valleys over. Old ranger station. Abandoned now. I stocked it years ago. We can make it. Clara nodded slowly. And then it happened. A sound from inside the cabin. Not a knock, not a voice. A sharp creak from the back wall. Barrett spun, rifle raised. Clara's blood ran cold. He's in the root cellar, she whispered. They rushed to the hatch. Too late. It burst open, and a man rose from the dark, knife flashing. Not Caleb. One of his brutes. Barrett fired, but the shot went wide. Clara grabbed the knife from her boot and threw it. It struck the man's shoulder. He howled, dropped the blade, and lunged at her. Barrett tackled him mid-step. They slammed into the table, splintering wood. The rifle clattered across the floor. Clara grabbed it. But the man rolled, slammed Barrett against the hearth, and raised the knife again. Clara aimed. Fired. The cabin shook with the shot. The man dropped, dead before he hit the floor. Barrett lay still for a moment, then groaned. You all right? She gasped. He coughed, heads ringing. Clara dropped beside him, cradling his head. You're bleeding again. I'll live. They both stared at the dead man. If he was in the cellar, Barrett said slowly, that means. They know the land better than we thought, Clara whispered. Barrett sat up, grimacing. We leave tonight, pack light, only what we can carry. Clara nodded, then we run together. Barrett looked at her, his eyes worn but sure. No more running, he said. We move forward, and if they follow, we bury them. Clara leaned in, touched her forehead to his. We'll make it. Outside, the wind rose again. But inside they stood. Not just survivors anymore. Not just protectors. A man and a woman, back to back, ready to fight for the child not yet born, and the life they hadn't yet dared to believe they could build. By the time the sun bled across the horizon, Clara had packed the cabin into 2 satchels. One was filled with food, dried meat and bread, a pouch of flour, herbs, and the smallest kettle. The other held ammunition, a fire starter, rope, and strips of linen for bandages. Barrett had insisted on carrying the heavier one despite the stiffness in his shoulder, the pain plain in his movements. She argued only once before realizing that his pride was one of the few things he had left that hadn't been taken or burned. They wrapped the dead man's body in burlap and dragged it behind the ridge. Barrett didn't bother digging. The ground was too hard and time too short. He left the man there like a warning. The snow would claim him soon enough. The cabin stood behind them like a hollowed-out shell, windows cracked, blood on the floorboards, the scent of smoke and gunpowder clinging to the walls. Clara paused at the threshold and looked back. She didn't mourn it. She hadn't been there long enough to love it, but it had sheltered her when the cold would have stolen her breath. It had given her space to stop running. More than that, it had given her him. Barrett reached the trail ahead of her, pausing only once to glance back. His eyes lingered not on the cabin but on her. We'll make it by dusk if we don't stop, he said. Clara nodded, then we won't stop. They walked in silence for nearly 2 hours, winding through narrow trails and frozen creek beds, moving like shadows through the trees. The weight of the child inside her slowed her more than she admitted, but she kept pace as best she could. Every time she faltered, Barrett waited, not impatient, just there, like a rock that refused to move no matter how hard the wind blew. By noon, clouds gathered again. Barrett kept looking at the sky. What is it? Clara asked. Storm coming, one of those fast ones that don't wait for permission. How far to the station? 3, maybe 4 miles. Then we push. They did. But the storm arrived before they reached the next ridge. It came sudden and sharp, a wall of snow and wind that swallowed the trail and turned the trees into gray ghosts. Clara wrapped her shawl tighter and leaned forward into the wind, every step a fight. Barrett reached for her hand and took it without asking. We need shelter, he said. Even just a lean-to. We ride this storm out or we don't make it. Clara nodded, chest heaving. They found a hollow beneath a rock outcrop, shielded on 3 sides, pine branches heavy above. Barrett dropped his pack and immediately set to work cutting boughs and stacking stone for a windbreak. Clara gathered kindling with shaking hands, teeth chattering despite the layers. The storm howled through the trees, whipping snow sideways, turning the world white and cold and endless. They built the fire just as the first flakes turned to icy needles. Barrett wrapped the last of the blankets around Clara and settled beside her, his body forming a barrier against the wind. Lean into me, he said. She did. Hours passed in the dim blur of smoke and cold. Clara dozed once or twice, the fire crackling, the ache in her legs dulled by exhaustion. Barrett kept watch, eyes never straying far from the dark line of the trail. The storm began to break near nightfall, wind dying, flakes softening to a whisper. That's when they heard the voice. Low. Close. Not Caleb. A woman. Clara Ridge. Clara sat bolt upright, heart in her throat. Barrett's rifle was in his hand before she could speak. "Who's there?" he called. The branches shifted, and a figure stepped into the half-light. She was tall, wrapped in a green coat too fine for mountain travel. Her hair was pale and pinned back. Her gloves were blood-red leather. She held no weapon that Clara could see, but something about her posture, upright, regal, untouched by the storm, made Clara's stomach twist. "I came to talk," the woman said. Barrett raised the rifle. "Talk's not what your kind comes for." "I'm not Wexler's kind." Clara stepped forward. "Who are you?" The woman smiled. "I'm someone who lost something too, a sister." Clara blinked. "Your sister was?" Me Ridge. Left the valley 2 winters ago, never came back." Clara's throat closed. "Me's dead." "I know," the woman said softly. "But before she died, she sent me a letter, said you were in danger, said if anything happened to her, I was to find you." Barrett did lower the rifle. "And you just now show up." The woman's smile vanished. "It took time. Caleb has eyes in every outpost. I had to come through the canyons. I'm not here to harm her. I'm here to help." Barrett glanced at Clara. Clara hesitated. "You're not with Caleb." "I want him dead as much as you do." Barrett lowered the rifle slightly. "What's your name?" Clara asked. "Juna." Barrett stepped closer. "Then prove it. What did me right?" Juna reached into her coat slowly, carefully, and drew out a weathered slip of paper. She passed it to Clara. The handwriting was unmistakable, her sister's. "Clara, if you ever need to run, don't run alone. There's a man in the mountains who owes me a debt. His name is Barrett Cade. Trust him, and if I don't make it, Juna will find you. You're stronger than you think. Love me." Clara's breath caught. "She knew you," she whispered. Juna nodded. "I loved her like blood, and now I'll help you get free." Barrett studied her carefully. "Why now?" "Because Caleb's got more men coming," Juna said. 10, maybe 12. They'll hit every trail before sunrise. Your best bet is to move now and not toward the station. He's already burned it." Barrett stiffened. "How do you know that?" "I followed him for 2 days," Juna replied. "He's chasing you because he thinks you're scared." Barrett smiled faintly. "He ain't wrong." "But you're angry too," Juna said, "and that makes you dangerous." Clara stepped forward. "Where do we go?" "There's a pass beyond Widow's Peak. Narrow, steep. Horses can't follow, takes you straight into the dry basin. From there you can reach the old Navajo settlement. They'll take you in." Barrett nodded. "I know the way." "I'll guide you," Juna offered. "I know the cuts, the safer slopes." Clara hesitated. "Can we trust you?" "You already are," Juna said softly. "I could have turned you in hours ago." Barrett looked at Clara. Clara nodded. "Then let's go," Barrett said. They moved fast. Clara's legs burned, her back ached, but she didn't stop. Not now. Not when the path was opening before them like a promise made true. The snow deepened again near the peak, but Juna knew every rise, every turn. Barrett led from the front, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. As dawn painted the ridge in gold, they crested the pass. And then they heard it. Hoofbeats. Far below. A line of riders, 12, maybe more, sweeping up the trail they'd left behind. Caleb rode at the front. Barrett crouched, hand on Clara's shoulder. "They're following." Clara's lips tightened. "Then we lead them somewhere they don't want to go." Juna stepped beside them, breathless. "There's a ridge 2 miles ahead, one way in, one way out." Barrett nodded. "A funnel." "We can collapse it behind us," Juna said. "And trap them." Clara's eyes narrowed. "No, we don't trap them." Barrett turned. "What then?" "We end them." Barrett looked at her and smiled. They moved fast. The wind clawed at their coats, the cold biting harder with every step, but no one stopped. Not Clara, though her legs trembled and her belly dragged like a lead stone. Not Barrett, though his shoulder bled anew through the half-healed wound. Not Juna, who navigated the narrow ridge path like a wolf scenting home. Behind them, the sound of hoofbeats thundered louder. Caleb Wexler wasn't creeping anymore. He was charging. The hunt was in full gallop. They reached the edge of the stone funnel just as the sun crested behind the jagged peaks. The pass dropped into a narrow, winding trail hemmed in by sheer rock on either side. Below, the dry basin stretched out like a cracked bowl of earth, dusted in snow and silence. To reach it, they had to descend through a natural bottleneck, only wide enough for a horse at a time, with loose shale and icy stone. And once you were in it, you couldn't turn around fast, not with men behind and cliffs to either side. Clara looked over her shoulder. She could see them now. Caleb's riders. 8 men, mounted and armed, barreling up the slope in 2 staggered lines. They'd left 4 behind somewhere, or lost them in the snow, but what remained was still more than enough to finish what they'd started. "We have to do this now," Juna said, her breath sharp and fast. "The ridge is narrow ahead. If we get them into the funnel, they'll have no cover." Barrett nodded. "You 2 go first, I'll draw them in." "No," Clara said immediately. "We stay together." "They'll see all 3 of us," he replied. "If we separate, they'll think it's a trap. We want that." "It is a trap," she said. Barrett allowed the barest hint of a grin. "Exactly." He pressed a small pouch into Juna's hands. "What is this?" she asked. "Black powder. Enough to set the whole pass shaking if you light it right." Juna looked at him sharply. "You carried this the whole time." Barrett shrugged. "Some men carry Bibles, I carry insurance." He looked at Clara, eyes steady. "You ready?" She nodded. Her hands were trembling, but not with fear. With resolve. They split. Juna took the left trail, skirting the edge of the cliff, moving fast and low with the pouch strapped to her belt. Clara and Barrett stayed center, just in sight. Barrett raised his rifle, aimed once and fired. The shot echoed off the cliffs. The lead rider dropped. The rest shouted, pulled their horses to a halt, but not for long. Barrett fired again, then turned and ran with Clara beside him. "They're coming," she called, panting. "Good," Barrett said grimly. "Let 'em." They reached the mouth of the funnel just as the second rider took the lead. Behind them, voices rose in anger and confusion. "He's alone." "No, there were 3. They're splitting." "Get the woman." Barrett dropped to one knee and fired again. Another rider fell. Clara grabbed his arm. "We have to go." He nodded and turned, following her into the funnel. The path was tight, slick with frost, bordered by jagged stone. Every step threatened to give beneath their boots. Clara slipped once, but Barrett caught her, steadying her with a grunt of pain. They moved like that, quick, careful, practiced, until they reached the clearing at the bottom. A narrow bowl of rock with only 2 ways in or out, forward into the basin or back up the chute. Juna was already there, crouched by a boulder with the powder pouch open, spreading a thin line along a crevice in the wall. "How long?" Barrett asked. 30 seconds once lit," she said. "Enough." He turned to Clara. "Stay behind me." Clara didn't answer. Barrett moved to the mouth of the funnel, rifle raised. The first rider appeared. Barrett shot him clean from the saddle. The horse screamed and veered sideways, tumbling into the rocks. Another rider came behind him, and another. Bullets snapped through the air, striking stone and echoing sharp off the walls. Clara ducked behind a ledge, heart pounding. "Now," Barrett shouted. Barrett sat by the stove, sharpening a blade that didn't need sharpening, his movements slow and distracted. His eyes wandered to the tiny bundle rising and falling on Clara's chest, the faintest curve of a smile on his face. He hadn't said much in the hours since Hope had been born, hadn't needed to. Every so often, he reached out and touched Clara's shoulder, or tucked the edge of a blanket closer to her, or whispered something only the child could hear. Juna returned from outside, arms full of dry wood. Her cheeks were flushed from cold and her hands cracked from days without gloves, but her eyes held a spark, relief, maybe even joy. "The trail looks good," she said, voice low. "No movement below, no tracks but ours." Clara stirred, "And the pass?" "Still sealed. You buried it well." Barrett grunted. "He'll find another way." "Let him," Juna said. "You've got a day's lead now, maybe two." Clara sat up with a wince. "Then we need to go." Barrett stood and crossed to her. "You just gave birth. We move too fast, we lose more than we've won." Clara's eyes flicked down to hope. "If we stay, we risk more than just our lives." Barrett didn't argue, he only nodded. "Then we move, but slow, careful. We take the basin route Juna talked about. It's longer but safer. No riders can follow without crossing open ground." "And Caleb?" Clara asked. Barrett met her gaze. "If he follows, he won't be walking out." They left the shack before the sun reached the tops of the pines. Juna led again, weaving through frost-dusted scrub and past forgotten cairns, guiding them along a path only someone who'd lived here long and quiet could know. Clara rode one of the pack horses they'd taken from the fallen riders. She held Hope close in a sling across her chest, the baby silent and warm, breathing in time with her mother's heartbeat. Barrett walked beside them, rifle always in hand, watching every shadow. For the first time in days, the world seemed to breathe with them. A fox darted across their trail. A hawk circled high above. Even the cold seemed gentler. They stopped at a stream near dusk. Clara washed the blood from her hands, from Hope's tiny feet. Barrett cleared brush for a fire. Juna cooked something thick and savory with dried meat and roots. No one spoke much. There wasn't a need to. But the quiet didn't last. That night, Clara woke to the sound of snapping twigs. She sat up, heart leaping, arms tightening around the baby. Barrett was already awake, crouched near the fire with his rifle drawn. Juna rose slowly, knife in hand. Then a voice. "I see you found yourself a family, Cade." Clara's blood turned to ice. Caleb Wexler stepped out of the shadows. Alone. His coat was torn, stained with soot and blood. His left arm hung at his side like dead weight. But his face was exactly as Clara remembered, smiling, mocking, cold. Barrett didn't flinch. He stepped forward, placing himself between Caleb and the others. "You should have died under that rock," he said. Caleb chuckled. "You buried cowards, I walked out, because I had something left to finish." Clara stood now, holding Hope close. "There's nothing left for you." "There's always something," Caleb said, eyes flicking to the baby. "That child's ridge blood." "She's mine," Clara said. "Not yours, not your brother S, not your family S." "You think I care about bloodlines," Caleb said, voice rising. "I care about power, about control. And you ran from it like a dog. You made me look weak. You think I can let that stand?" Barrett raised the rifle. Caleb smiled. "You going to kill me in front of your daughter?" Without blinking, Barrett replied. Juna moved silently around the edge of the clearing, circling. Caleb didn't notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. "You're not a father," Caleb said. "You're just a man playing house in the wilderness. She's not yours. None of this is. You're living in someone else's dream, and I came to wake you up." Barrett stepped forward. "You talk too much." Then from behind, Juna struck. She moved fast, slamming the butt of her knife into the side of Caleb's head. He staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he turned on her with fury and lunged, drawing a small pistol from his coat. Clara shouted. Barrett fired. The shot struck Caleb in the leg. He dropped to one knee. Juna kicked the pistol from his hand. Caleb lunged again, grabbing her wrist. They struggled, crashing to the ground. Barrett moved to intervene, but Clara was already there. She stepped forward, eyes burning, one arm wrapped around Hope, the other holding a blade low and ready. "Let go," she said. Caleb didn't. So she slashed. Not a deep cut, just enough to make him scream and let go of Juna. Barrett stepped in and slammed the butt of his rifle into Caleb's jaw. He crumpled. Blood pooled under his face. And still he breathed. They tied him, gagged him, dragged him to the center of the clearing. Barrett looked down at him. "We could leave him," Juna said. "He'll follow," Clara said. "He always does." Barrett stared at Caleb for a long time. Then said no. Clara flinched. "You're going to kill him." Barrett shook his head. "Not my justice to give." He looked at Clara. She stepped forward, kneeling beside the unconscious man. "I dreamt about this," she said, "killing him, ending it." Barrett watched her carefully. "But now I just want to be free," she whispered. She stood and turned away. "Leave him," she said. "Let the cold finish what the mountain started." They rode on. By morning, they'd reached the far edge of the basin. Hills gave way to gentle rises, and the horizon widened. In the distance, a small settlement waited, mud brick homes, smoke rising from chimneys, a bell on a crooked pole ringing slow and low. Juna nodded. "They'll take you in, ask no questions, offer shelter." Barrett looked at Clara. "You want this?" She looked at him, at the baby in her arms, at the quiet ahead, and then back at the blood-stained snow behind them. "No," she said softly, "I don't want shelter. I want to build something." Barrett smiled, then whispered, "Then let's start." They stayed. Found land past the ridge, soil good enough for planting, water close, trees strong for building. The cabin came slowly, beam by beam, brick by brick. Hope grew fat and loud, her laugh echoing through the trees like birdsong. Juna visited often but never stayed. She preferred the path, the chase, the freedom. She always left with a smile and came back with news. Clara woke each morning beside a man who had once claimed her with a growl and a vow. Now he just held her hand. Barrett carved a cradle from the heart of an old pine and said nothing when Clara cried over it. They never found Caleb's body, but they never saw him again. And when the wind howled at night, it howled past them, not at them. They were no longer running. They were no longer afraid. They were a family. And in the vast, brutal silence of the wild, they had carved out a life no one could take. Not ever again.